Not all heroes wear capes, the saying goes. As I learned at a young age, some of them wear a white tie and tails. That's pianist Arthur Rubinstein, who's been a hero figure of sorts throughout this podcast series. He's playing Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat, fittingly known as the Heroic. The piece embodies all the courage and triumph over adversity of an 80s action-adventure movie, and more. At least for me, there was something about the abstract heroism of Chopin's Polonaise that lit a fire in me like Indiana Jones never could. While Indy could outrun boulders, Freddie could conquer any and all obstacles in my imagination. The patriotic aspect of Chopin's Polonaises is undeniable. Biographer Alan Walker said that Chopin turned his pen into a sword when he composed the A-flat Polonaise. And in that famous octave passage at the heart of the piece, Franz Liszt heard the galloping horses of the Polish cavalry on the way to battle. And while the military rhythms of the Polonaise certainly were thrilling to my teenage ears, the music itself never told me anything specific about a Polish war effort, nor for that matter the revolutionary stirrings in France during the 1840s that George Sand is said to have identified with the piece. The Heroic Polonaise even has a history of being recast in patriotic guises far from its country of origin. Like when the Russian émigré pianist Vladimir Horowitz played it for troops at American military bases during World War II. Nor has the piece been the exclusive domain of just Polish pianists like Rubinstein. Rather, it's been championed by pianists from around the world during the 20th and 21st centuries. One of its most memorable performances was given by the Argentine pianist Martha Argerich at the 1965 International Chopin Competition. And it was the chosen Polonaise of 3 consecutive gold medalists at the same competition between 2005 and 2015, hailing from Poland, Russia, and South Korea, respectively. And while I don't want to take away from the glory and national pride that Poland rightly feels in all of Chopin's Polonaises, I'd like to believe that here in the 21st century, the exhilaration and emotion of this music speaks to the as yet unrealized aspirations of a universal human future. Welcome to the Chopin Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Laude, and over the course of this series, we'll be diving deep into the music of Frédéric Chopin, with episodes on each of Chopin's major compositional genres. This is Season 2, Episode 4, Polonaises. In this episode, I meet Garrick Ohlsson in his home to explore Chopin's Polonaises at the piano. Then we're joined by a pair of recent medalists from the International Chopin Competition who will react to their own Polonaise performances from Warsaw. 2021 silver medalist Alexander Gadzhiev and 2010 gold medalist Juliana Avdieva. And finally, Jed Distler recommends some of the greatest Polonaise recordings over the past century. You can listen to full episodes of the Chopin Podcast on podcasting platforms the day of release, or watch video segments from each episode in the following days as they're posted to my YouTube channel. Just look up my name, Ben Laude. That's Benlaude. This podcast is produced in partnership with the Chopin Foundation of the United States, presenters of the National Chopin Competition in Miami, Florida, every 5 years. I was thrilled to host the live streams of the Miami competition this past January, and am excited to continue my collaboration with the Chopin Foundation through to the International Chopin Competition held in Warsaw this fall. The honorary chairman of the U.S. Chopin Foundation is none other than Garrick Ohlsson, who will be with us every step of the way during this podcast series. To this day, Garrick is the only pianist from the United States ever to win first prize at the International Chopin Competition. And in October 2025, he will become the first ever non-Pole to chair the competition in Warsaw. Garrick is one of the few pianists ever to record Chopin's complete works, published by the Hyperion label. Many of the recordings heard during the series are taken from that set. Digital downloads of the complete cycle are available for purchase on Hyperion's website. And now, after having conducted over a dozen virtual interviews with Garrick for the Chopin podcast, I was happy to meet him face-to-face to talk shop, excuse the pun, and explore our mutual passion for the Polonaises.
I always think this is one of the most gloriously patriotic pieces in the world because it's not mean-spirited. It's not like we won, we conquered them, which of course in Polish history has virtually never happened.
Yeah.
But it's such a warm, lovable piece. I mean, that theme itself. It slips into minor and then goes into major. It has such an emotional volatility, and it's so beautiful lyrically. Practically every Rubinstein recital I heard, if it wasn't the ending piece on the program, it was an encore. And when I was growing up in the 50s, it was one of the most pop tunes that people played, and they played it in simplified versions, or however those simplified versions went. And as I was a young pianist growing up, between the ages of 8 and maybe 15, aside from Melancholy Baby, one of the most frequent requests was play Polonaise, because it wasn't the Chopin Polonaise, it was play Polonaise. It's one of Chopin's greatest introductions. Of course, Chopin never repeats himself in any way. He never wrote anything else like this.
How does that beginning flow? It's not an easy opening. I mean, it's almost like once you get to the theme, finally you can rest in a way.
Exactly.
The very first page is very challenging.
Very challenging. Well, of course, the first thing the pianist has to do is figure out how to play. What's your fingering for fourths, and how are you going to get... and how to connect those so that you can actually play them without thinking about them, because, what you don't want to do is that. It has to be a confident gesture, so of course that means you have to practice it a lot, but you have to practice everything a lot. And this happens twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then it happens in the left hand in octaves. And then it finally settles on the dominant, and out of this beautiful swirl grows the melody. And that's, if I'm not mistaken, at Rubinstein's encores, often there would be applause at that point. It was such a pop piece.
Yeah.
Everybody was thrilled with it, and then when they got to the it's like maybe Italian opera was at one point, when you sing the big show-stopping number, everybody applauds just before it even starts.
I guess Chopin has you warm up your octaves there on the first page, because later you're going to need them.
Well, if you've played the first half of the piece, you're warmed up. It's a blisteringly heavy, difficult piece altogether. That's where we want to be. It's thrilling. Anyway, I should have practiced more.
No,
I didn't practice at all.
Sounds glorious. And the one thing I'm noticing is, although I feel like it's there, we never really see a straightforward jum, ba 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 ba.
No, we don't.
Which is the characteristic Polonaise rhythm. What makes this a Polonaise so far? It sure sounds like a Polonaise.
It certainly does. Well, if you actually put a Polonaise rhythm into the melody,
Well, in a way, it is there if you just go between the hands. Yeah, well, di, da. I mean, it's da, da, da.
Brilliant,
It is
brilliant,
there.
yeah. But I think this is very important in playing polonaises because sometimes you won't have a ba-ba-bum at all. But I think it has to do with how you phrase it, like the little A flat. Although that's the harmonic rhythm. But you're right about this.
It's in there.
Polonaise is a court dance in 3/4. It's stately, but it's not stiff, and it has march aspects, but it's not a 1-2-3 march. It's not on the beat so much. Although the beats are the moment you say something about a Polonaise rhythm, you contradict yourself. But the yum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum bum, which is the most famous Polonaise rhythm, and it's a classic thing. The tendency is sometimes to spend too much time for us pianists on da-da-dum, moving toward the second beat. In other words, because the second beat gets a natural accent, yum, da-da-dum, bum, bum. It gets a natural lift from it. But sometimes it's not quite that, because if you play it literally in time, slowly, we all know from listening to polonaises and good pianists playing them, it's not quite in time. And this is one of the many examples of the limitations of our rhythmic notation system. We don't have, for example, between a 16th note and a 32nd note, we don't have anything else until the 20th century, when we start micro-managing rhythms. And we're musical, and we sort of understand those things because nobody wants to hear I mean, if every note is just sort of equal and square, it doesn't sound very dashing or heroic. But there is a danger. I won't say you shouldn't, but there is a danger to approach that rhythm as a 1-2-3. And actually, what you need is kind of this. It's kind of almost a lift. It gives a little emphasis to. One Polish musician said it's almost as if this is a triplet, but you don't play the first note. There's many ways of thinking of it. So I'll play the military Polonaise trio slowly. It's not. Or perhaps more direct, and since we're talking about Polonaises, the Grand Polonaise, Opus 22, is a whole study in everything on the second eighth note of the bar, including he writes lots of wrong notes. So once again, I'm going slow. It's not. As we know. He even writes the act there. Part of the theme ends on a wrong note. Whoops, wrong, right? That's what a normal composer would write. Is this making sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it's one of the reasons why your heroic Polonaise, which I just heard right here in all of its glory, somehow sounded light. I mean, you're playing very heavy piece, but it has a kind of air in and around it somehow, even though it was extremely loud.
No, thank you. case, by the way, my one advice to students and pianists is take Chopin seriously. The theme is forte only.
Right.
The first time.
You don't want to give it all away after the first build.
Because sometimes people get so excited. Of course you do. Here we are, and it's like, I think it's more lyric, and then he gives you the setup. Much more satisfying, I think. It's really...
Every time. I never get sick of it. And the scale you played, I mean, is another bravura aspect of this. Everyone's watching an encore of this. You're seeing crazy double notes. You're seeing cool arpeggios.
Rare in Chopin just
octaves,
to go...
Suddenly a scale. And I always use this as, kids, if you want to find an ascending melodic minor scale, here's your example from Chopin. It's B-flat minor, but with the raised 6th and 7th. And there is no more thrilling scale. And every time it comes back after that first time is another octave more.
That's right.
And it's the kind of scale, once you get it in both hands, it always feels pretty good after that. You can just chunk it all the way up, and it doesn't,
You have to put the chunks together, so... You have to practice from thumbs, otherwise it's going to...
When you're tossing it off, some part of you embedded is still thinking in terms of chunks. You're still chunking it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the mind gets that very much. We said that there's no characteristic Polonaise rhythm yet in this piece, but it's about to come right around the corner. But once in a while, Chopin goes to Spain, and not just Mallorca. Mm-hmm. This is... It has the arrogance of a bullfighter, doesn't it? Sorry, I get too excited when I play this piece.
One of the most visually interesting, but also obviously in the music too, sections of this piece is the middle part. When we get an ostinato like no other in Chopin, a circling, 4-note octave figuration that begins in E major. I don't know, at some point this must become easy. But I remember I still find it tricky to just keep the hand going. But talk to us about it both from a physical, human level. What a strange thing for my left hand to be doing for a while. What's happening here?
Well, what's happened is you've had this big, triumphant, wonderful piece, and now you get the cavalry coming in, I guess. And the horse's hoofs... It's this ostinato, which is stubborn, and it won't stop, but it builds up an enormous amount of tension.
It begins with these loud chords first, so it's some kind of call. It's just so exciting, and yet nothing's happening, in a way.
No, it's not going anywhere. And then as the crescendo grows, suddenly he bursts into the next key down.
D sharp major, of course.
Yes. This suddenly reminds me, this is a precursor of Ravel's Bolero, where you have the same with the yum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, bump for about, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a brilliant piece, but at the end of it, whenever you have a repeated thing like that, eventually you have to get out of it. And Ravel gets out of it by switching into E major out of C major. But it's a similar gesture here. That this switch is so thrilling, actually. Yeah. And when any pianist plays it, when you play it in E, you're going counterclockwise.
And then D sharp, it's clockwise too.
Yeah, and that's probably 4-5, 5-4-5.
It's interesting. We think of Liszt as really the one who pioneered octaves of all types, and yet those Funerai octaves couldn't be. I feel like they come straight out of the heroic Polonaise.
They're a direct lift, even the way the tune. Yeah, it's a direct steal and it's a direct tribute. They're actually harder. I think Funerai is, yes, it's a tribute to the fallen of the revolution, but it's got so much Chopin in it.
Especially that piece.
In the feel, it's not a direct quote, but it's a feel, and even the theme with the funeral march thing doesn't sound like Chopin's funeral march, but
it's a next door neighbor to it.
It's next door neighbor, and in fact, I mean, Chopin and Liszt, as we know, had this sort of odd love-hate relationship, which is understandable for two people of such genius.
Yeah.
But Liszt loved Chopin very, very, very deeply and knew his work.
Well, I would have loved to hear Liszt play this. I'm sure he played the heck out of it. And one of the things about Liszt music is just his ability to build drama and tension. He would often utilize diminished chords to do it pretty quickly. This piece does all kind of harmonic things to get where it wants to, but I'm thinking of this sort of whole windy, hypnotic passage on our way out of
after the octaves,
on the way out of the octaves. Just spinning, and it just seems like the glass is filling up and things are getting just more and more disorienting almost. I wonder what you make of this whole section, bringing us back to the main theme. Just one of the most extraordinary
When I
passages,
was 9 years old or 10 years old, I probably didn't like it very much. I wanted to get back to the action, but now it's almost my favorite part.
I almost don't want it to end.
And then he puts these funny accents in the treble, which are actually quite beautiful if you take them literally and don't worry about the melodic anymore. We've heard the tune. I used to think that was so unmusical and hard, impossible to do. If you think of it as it's sort of a getting lost,
If pedal tones, in your theory, have tend to have something to do with either sleeping or, I think in a similar way,
dream state,
some kind of altered state.
Yeah, when your eyes go like,
yes, when you keep hitting that C, it almost feels like maybe after the battle in the middle section, the soldiers got drunk or something. I don't know what happened, but in any case, they wake up.
They sort of rouse themselves and say, "We're heroic again." Yep. Well, anyway,
it's an amazing piece, and it ends with a brief coda,
amazingly, and that's where we get lots of Polonaise rhythms. We get the full flowering.
Could you take us from the final sweeping scale and just play the end for us?
With difficulty, but I'll try.
Sure.
Something like that.
Woo! All right, hit the showers.
I guess we know this piece.
It's really one of his most public pieces. You've talked about the fantasy as a public piece.
This is I
think it's the most public.
I would say so too.
Yeah. It's so outward. Even the introverted moments, whatever these moments when you're drawn inside, they still feel like that you're sharing it. Mm-hmm. It's not a secret.
No, it's not. You're not weeping in your room by yourself.
It is worth mentioning. I mean, the Polonaises were not like strictly a Polish music. They were already very popular throughout the 18th century, all around Europe. I mean, J.S. Bach has a Polonaise in his E major French suite.
That's right.
There's a Polonaise in Beethoven's Triple Concerto.
There's actually a Beethoven Polonaise.
And there's a Beethoven Polonaise. That's right.
It's a la mode. I mean, it was a style. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's interesting. It seemed like it went more from being almost a sort of pan-European dance that originates in Poland to acquiring more and more.
I'll have an espresso. I'll have a whatever French crepe, which was probably served everywhere.
Right. But with Chopin, and especially in the early 19th century in Poland, it acquired kind of a new meaning and just national symbolism.
Absolutely. Good to remind people that Chopin's the first national composer. All the other European national composers come a little bit later than he does.
We think of it as a later 19th century phenomenon, nationalism in music.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, since Poland didn't exist on the map at this point, and Chopin left Poland, and was loved his country and was very patriotic, he became the kind of the symbol, as we know. I mean, I always make the bad joke that he probably didn't intend to die at age 39 and never see his homeland again, and that makes it so tragic. I mean, it's tragic enough, but he became a national symbol. He became the spirit of Poland in a way,
and yet, a boy from White Plains, New York, in your case, or a kid from Round Rock, Texas, in my case, we can gravitate towards this music as if it's native to us. There is something that speaks beyond just Poland, even if these rhythms and originate. One could always make the case with any national inspired music that you kind of had to be. It's the you had to be there case. Oh, you have to hear somebody who really grew up there. And I always give credence to that. I believe there's truth to that. I do want to hear musicians who eat, drink, and breathe Polonaises natively and mazurkas. But there's this other thing about Chopin's music, which is that it is sort of for everyone.
Absolutely.
I hear many passageways into other Polonaises, and one random moment, bar 132, this major, minor, major, in the middle of the C-sharp minor Polonaise, as things are sort of cadencing in our D-flat section, there's a moment just like that. It's these little motifs that find their way and crawl around in his Polonaises a bit or in his other music.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it's not something that's characteristic of certain 19th century Polonaises. Maybe in the Onegin Polonaise of Tchaikovsky, there's dum-ba-dum-ba-dum-ba-dum-ba-dum. Okay.
So I've sort of dug a tunnel to Opus 26. Now, this is one of two published opuses of Chopin that have two Polonaises in them. This is Opus 26, numbers 1 and 2. We have C sharp minor, and then we have an E flat minor. And I'll just point out that in the Chopin competition, both the one we had recently in Miami and then, of course, the big one in Warsaw, these are actually on the list. You can choose Opus 26 in the second round, so if you make the second stage when you're allowed to choose a Polonaise, but you have to play them both.
Wow.
Could you play the opening phrase and show us its characteristics, the phrase which then is repeated so often?
Yeah, I'm going to play the whole opening because you're going to get, even within that, you're going to get a loud and a soft version of the same material. You have an introduction, then the material comes twice, more or less. And repeats.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just because I'm getting, avuncular in my old age. But I loved when Alfred Brendel said that he viewed Schubert's repeats in some of the late sonatas, big, long ones, as invitations rather than commands. I mean, that's very beautiful and very gracious. But I think you have to wonder, is it a command or is it what was done? That's just the way everyone does it.
Well, in a way, the history of music, especially in the 19th century, is the history of the elimination of repeat signs.
Right.
And so even in Chopin's Polonaises, we have a journey from formally bound, repeated material to, as we'll see in Opus 44, for the first time, there is repetition. He doesn't write repeat signs, though.
Yes, and let's not forget he wrote maybe more or less 10 other Polonaises before he wrote the Opus one.
Which do have...
And they all have the same repeats. Yeah. They're just it's absolutely a formal thing, just like in scherzos and minuets. That's a lot of information already because he's already varying it. Look, in this first presentation theme, which is a kind of circular thing, da-da-dum, ba-ba-ba, talk about Polonaise rhythms, yeah. I remember my teacher, Irma Volpic, complaining very much when she heard a famous pianist played it. She said, he played those two bars absolutely in time. She said, dum-dum-bum. And she did not like that, of course.
What did she favor?
Ba-ba-bum. She felt it has we'll get to rubato later, and we'll get to things like that. But anyway, he has it once loud with one phrase, and this is the end of it. Then it's piano with little sculptures, and then retard going one note higher. So it shows you that different ways he would vary things.
Right.
So it wasn't like this is the theme and it's always this way.
And then when this sort of B section comes, we don't have the Polonaise rhythm anymore, but somehow it's still underneath it all.
But it's interesting, you can also feel that second beat. What's Chopin doing with it? Why isn't it? Because the Polonaise often goes...
gives every Polonaise that movement to that beat. It always gives you the sense of coming out of your chair, moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
I'm never just sitting back.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It gets you out of your chair. It literally gets you on your feet. It's reaching for something.
He has a little dream. And I asked you were playing this beautifully for me today, and I said, Ben, you're not playing it as written. Why is that? Because here's how it's written. I mean, I'm going to be stupid about it. Once again, we are so limited by the 8th note and the 16th notes. I mean, yeah, you better never have any rubato. I mean, as if rubato is naughty. It's very natural. Is it da 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 da? I think not. But then he goes to the opera, the Italian opera.
I was going to say, I said in the outer sections that Polonaises always have you on the edge of your seat. They're always getting you up and going. Here, I do feel like you can relax and luxuriate on that downbeat.
Yes,
it's like,
yes, the Italian singers have arrived.
Yeah.
Because he finishes... He goes to major like in a nocturne.
And almost like an American kind of popular song. One of the things I have trouble with when I perform this piece, and I think it's even more prevalent in the next Polonaise, is just the sort of ebb and flow of time. I mean, we think, the Polonaise has a kind of strict rhythm to it, and yet, especially in the E flat minor, ritardando, crescendo. I mean, it's like pulling you back and forth. How do you phrase the opening of this? This piece is filled with trepidation at the beginning.
Yeah, this is a very odd. I mean, this is one of Chopin's darkest pieces. It was even. It got a label, I think, in the 19th century, the Siberian Polonaise, for some reason. I don't know why. Or it also was called Revolt, because it is kind of a seditious piece. I mean, it's angry, and it starts with an ending, which is really unusual. This is a very upset piece. I mean, you've got... That's not pretty stuff.
I've heard the F sharp minor called the tragic Polonaise. This, for me, is the more tragic.
I would think so, yeah.
I mean, it's menacing. It's
It's interesting. I mean, you and I have discussed the always phenomenal and controversial Joseph Hoffman. And yet, as I was pointing out to you, for those who wonder why he's so weird sometimes, we just listened together to the very opening, and you could take dictation for Chopin's notation from it. It's exactly what the man wrote, except for one voicing. In terms of, the dynamic, the polka real, the acceleron, was like, you couldn't be more precise, and yet somehow it still sounds characterful and full of dread and alarm and so on. So he's a very interesting case, as are all great interpreters. There are 5 versions of the same thing, and he varies at each time. That is a whole 19th century tradition that was almost considered what you do when you see the same stuff again. You do something different. And it was even said Chopin never played a piece the same way twice. We don't know what that means. But the question is, how much freedom do we have and do we not? We live in a less freedom-inclined age than Joseph Hoffman did.
You're listening to a performance of Chopin's E-flat minor Polonaise Opus 26 No. 2 from the 11th National Chopin Competition, given by Karina Sang, winner of the Polonaise Prize. Played as a pair with the C-sharp minor Opus 26 No. 1, these are among the Polonaises contestants could choose from in the quarterfinal round, along with the F-sharp minor Opus 44, the heroic A-flat Opus 53, and the Andante Spianato and Grand Polonaise Opus 22. The Miami competition was a huge hit, attracting over 300,000 YouTube views during the week-long event and selling out the final round concerts. It was my privilege to host the live streams on behalf of the Chopin Foundation and interview the many talented competitors. Congratulations to all of the prize winners, and especially to gold medalist William Yang and silver medalist Anthony Ratanov, both of whom earned automatic admission to the live rounds of the International Chopin Competition this October. They'll be joined by 2 other competitors from the U.S. competition this year, semi-finalists Victoria Wong and Antony Kleczek. To relive all the competitors' performances from Miami, as well as fun conversations I had with them there, make sure you're subscribed to the Chopin Foundation YouTube channel. If you liked this video, consider supporting my Patreon, where I've been posting bonus content with many of the guests who've appeared in this series.